I'm Dan Hotchkiss, author of Governance and Ministry, a book for leaders of churches, synagogues, and other mission-driven groups. It's about how to organize, decide on plans, and get work done. In this video, I'm going to give a brief overview of governance and ministry, the problems it's meant to solve, some of the underlying concepts and ideas, what it looks like in practice, and the benefits you can expect if you follow my suggestions. First, what's the problem? Well, as a minister, a denominational executive, and consultant, interfaith consultant, I've worked in lots of congregations. And in almost every case, I've been impressed with the devotion and loyalty I've seen there. Sometimes I've been impressed with their capacity to dream great dreams and their efficiency at carrying them out, but not usually. Most of the time, I'm struck by how good we are in congregations at reproducing yesterday and how strongly we resist imagining tomorrow, and how we disempower the leaders who could take us there. For example, lots of congregations put committees in charge of pieces of their work. In the book, I call that the committee-centered congregation. There might be a committee for children's education, one for worship, music, social justice, and whatever else. Committees also manage support functions too, like check writing, bookkeeping, personnel, and building maintenance. Committees report usually to the board, literally by giving reports at board meetings, and by coming to the board to get permission to do something new, as if the board were the supervisor. They need to do that especially if a lot of money is involved or if it might affect the work of another committee. Over time, certain committees turn out to be more equal than others because they control resources other committees need. In bigger congregations, paid staff work alongside of committees, setting up a dual hierarchy of committees that report up to the board and staff who report up to the head of staff. It's a complicated structure, but it's one that a lot of us grew up with. I did in the 1950s and 60s when it worked pretty well. Some of us have mastered it, but like any structure, it has certain weaknesses. I'll name just three. One is that it's time-consuming. It requires a lot of meetings. Action often has to wait for a committee meeting to approve. Often the same conversation happens more than once at various committee and board meetings. Leaders learn to play it safe by waiting for permission instead of taking risks. Another problem is that committees, especially committees that are put in charge of managing a program, tend to resist change. As a result, it's easier to keep doing what you've done before, even if it's not working. To do something new, you have to get permission. Finally, in larger churches, it can be unclear whether a staff member is accountable to their committee or to their supervisor. Staff spend lots of time attending meetings, smoothing over ruffled feathers, and avoiding conflict. You might wonder whether this is the best use of staff time. In the 1950s, those problems were not serious. People were more willing to attend meetings then, particularly women without paid employment. Repeating what you did last year worked pretty well for congregations in those days. Lots of people, again especially women, had good skills at smoothing over conflicts and hurt feelings. You might have noticed, though, that things have changed. Volunteers still do a lot of work in congregations, but they're less patient about going through the motions and routines of organizational life. Whether we hire staff or recruit volunteers, we need to satisfy new, generally higher expectations. People who carry large responsibilities at work, completed projects start to finish, are not happy to wait for a committee meeting before they can make changes, spend money, or pick people to work with. Also, in our time, congregations need to innovate. Repeating what we did last year or 10 years ago does not produce the same results. On average, it produces worse results. We need to learn the discipline of innovation, testing, and evaluating new ideas all the time. But not just any ideas. To innovate productively, we need to learn to choose goals and articulate them in a way that is not tethered to our current way of doing things. Instead of saying, our goal for next year is to increase our youth Sunday school attendance by 25%, we need to zoom out and ask an open question. What good do we hope our children's ministry will do? And set a vision goal, like next year we're going to learn about the lives of elementary school-aged children in our neighborhood by trying 3 experiments to explore new ways of reaching and supporting them. As we meet this moment, we need to get better at choosing goals together. Having done that, we need to empower paid and unpaid leaders to go off and work creatively, take risks, and evaluate results, then move on gracefully to next steps. We need to allow gifted individuals and groups to do things the whole group would be too cautious to attempt. We need to be connected without getting stuck. My friend and colleague Susan Beaumont calls this leading when you don't know where you're going. Her book is a great guide for leaders who need to lead by trial and error in this strange season. My book, Governance and Ministry, is about what dynamic leadership looks like as a structure and a process. What would it be like to be connected but unstuck? The book begins by noticing 2 kinds of leadership that I call, wait for it, governance and ministry. As you can see, I visualize these not as 2 sealed-off departments, but as overlapping spaces. The overlap ensures they stay connected. The separateness keeps them from getting stuck. A dynamic structure creates different times and places for governance and ministry to happen, and devise ways to connect and hold them both accountable. So what do I mean by governance and ministry? Governance is leading the congregation to fulfill its mission. It includes defining what the mission is, choosing the top goals and biggest strategies, delegating authority to those who will carry out the work, adopting policies to set limits and give guidance, and holding leaders accountable for how they use their authority. Good governance means taking time to think about why the congregation exists at all, what difference it should make, and to whom. Writing a mission statement is part of governance, so is setting a short list of goals that answer questions like, what does our mission call for us to do in the next few years? What big steps do we envision taking over the next 5 years toward the fulfillment of our mission? And it includes providing high-level answers to those questions to guide the congregation's work over time. Governance is leading the congregation to fulfill its mission. Ministry means leading the work day to day. It includes most of what you see in congregations: worship, education, music, social action, pastoral care. Things we might normally call program. When I say ministry, I include all that and the support work that makes it possible. Communication, money management, building maintenance. Combining worship and support functions into a unified decision-making structure requires office staff, bean counters, and the fix-it crew, not to mention the web manager, to support programmatic goals. And it forces program leaders to take cost into account. Governance and ministry require different kinds of work, so it makes sense to organize differently to do each one. Governance and ministry require two leadership structures working in partnership, connected but not stuck. Governance is best entrusted to a small, deliberative group of people with the courage to think deeply about change and the flexibility to respect differing perspectives. Thinking about change makes people anxious. Boards need to experience that anxiety and then welcome others to join in at a rate they can handle. How big should a board be? From a group dynamics point of view, 7 is the perfect number. Politically, you may need 8 or 9. Beyond that, the bigger a board gets, the more it tends to let a small group do most of the work, while the rest just show up. If they do show up, to be participants, not leaders. In real life, a board of about 9, including everyone who regularly participates with or without voting, turns out to be the best. The board has 3 main jobs: partnership, especially with the head of staff; planning, especially medium-term planning, 3 to 5 years; and policy, especially policies that delegate authority to others, so management decisions can be made away from the board table. That's part of what I mean by not stuck. Whenever anybody has to wait for a meeting before doing their jobs, structure's getting in the way. The board's boss is the congregation. That's tricky because most congregants don't pay attention much to the board's core work. Elections tend to be perfunctory, and congregational meetings, well, my friend Rabbi Joshua Lesser compared most congregational meetings to the safety announcements that you hear on airplanes. Perfunctory, required by law, and focused on survival. When we do better, it's because the board itself has engineered the congregational meeting to be useful. Ministry is best entrusted to a small team led by a clergy leader, or in a setting where there is no clergy leader, a lay volunteer. Ministers lead in all kinds of styles: egalitarian, hierarchical, consultative, or democratic. Each style can work well, so long as it's consistent with the values of the group and gets the work done. Ministry is about recruiting, training, directing, supporting, coaching, and delegating to achieve results largely through the efforts of others. Ministry includes paid staff and volunteers, everyone who works to achieve practical results day to day. Congregations, especially relatively wealthy ones, often depend on staff to do ministry work for them, when it would be more productive to hire staff to recruit, lead, train, and support others. Incorporating volunteers into the ministry staff can help with that. The staff is accountable to the board. Board policies speak to the staff, which is responsible for working toward the vision goals the board and head of staff agree on. The difference between governance and ministry is partly about time. Governance is about years. How will we need to change over the next 3 years? How did we do last year relative to our goals and budget? How goes it with our key relationships, especially the relationship between the board and clergy leader, each with the congregation, the denomination, and key partners in the community? Of course, the minister and staff care about all those things too. but the core responsibility for them, long term, rests with the board. Ministry is about time too, but it's about this week, this month, and this year, also this weekend. Will we staff the youth program? Will we visit shut-ins often enough that they feel included? Will we make our budget? Those are ministry concerns, what in other contexts we might call management concerns. The tools of ministry are recruiting, supervising, coordinating, and appreciating. Of course, the board cares about those things too, and board members are involved in them directly as volunteers. But the core responsibility for them rests with the staff-led ministry structure. Governance and ministry are not two sealed-off compartments. In healthy congregations, everyone is welcome to participate in both. But they are different. Governance focuses on the long term. Boards should be thinking about plans for years that don't have budgets yet. Those are the years where boards can have their greatest impact. They can plan for real change. They can lay the groundwork to raise serious money. Governance and ministry require different kinds of work. Each has different outcomes and a different tempo. Governance produces minutes, resolutions, policies, basically words on paper. Ministry produces worship, programs, pastoral care, social action, practical results. Governance in ministry is not about dividing work by subject matter like a TV family from the 1950s, where mom makes meals and cares for children while dad manages the money, house, and car. Both governance and ministry concern themselves with every aspect of the congregation's work. The difference is the time scale they're paying the most attention to and the kinds of decisions they make. Governance requires leadership with the courage to see a changing world and imagine how faith might require our congregation to transform itself. Ministry requires leaders who can map a route from where we are to where we want to go, who can recruit people with the necessary skills and organize them to work well together. Can some people do both? Yes. Do most people have a preference? Yes. By protecting times and spaces for these two types of leadership, we can plan boldly for tomorrow while at the same time accomplishing the work that can and must be done today.